YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Standing in one of my nicer patches of regrowth forest. A fact which is immediately apparent when you look at the fallen crowns and the stumps left behind, as well as the coppices. Some of these are axe cut on sucker bashed coppices. Others have been felled with a cross-cut saw. As you can see, there's a variety. But the important thing is the land is recovering. Topsoil is coming back, so is the understory. Those wattle trees might look a bit scrubby, but you can make flour out of their seeds. So anyway, those of you who've been paying attention to my channel may recall that about 3 months ago I heard chainsaw noises on my eastern boundary, and I invested in some cans of spray paint to mark my boundary. The idea being to show my next door neighbour, the sawmiller, where to stop cutting. Let's go and have a look and we'll see how well he did at staying inside his own patch. And just by the by, this is around about a 120 to 150 year old regrowth stringy bark. It takes a really long time for this country to repair itself after it's been developed, logged, exploited, harvested, vandalised, or otherwise trashed for a profit. But the big thing is to fence it in and keep the loggers away and keep the sheep away. Unless you want to live in the middle of thistles, briar, stinging nettles and hard-footed land lice. And I'm sure you can guess what I choose to do with the bit of the planet that I paid for the responsibility of looking after. Go, run away, run away. You can tell that I don't like you. Sheep. And this is the power line, which more or less neatly bisects my place, with 50 acres of my place being to the west, another 50 acres being to the east. My next door neighbour, the sawmiller, thought his place came all the way here to the power lines. Therefore, I had to spray paint my boundary in order to safeguard all of this from the bulldozers and the chainsaws. And of course, I was not able to influence the power line easement clearing crew when they were cutting down anything they thought might possibly present a danger to their sacred power line. And yeah, they did make a bit of a kind of a mess, but they wood chipped the crowns and they spread the wood chips out as mulch, so they tried to clean up after themselves. And when it's all said and done, the whole idea was to prevent trees growing on my place from being blown over and causing an arc and thereby lighting a bushfire. So I suppose you could say they have got a fairly reasonable excuse, and they do try not to make any more of a mess than they have to. Okay, so here we are in a clearing close to my eastern boundary. This clearing has suffered what they call a downburst, where a big patch of cold air falls out of a thunderstorm and lands vertically on top of the trees and pushes a whole bunch of them over, laying them down more or less on the perimeter of a circle because the air was spiralling as it fell down. Okay, so this is what this place looks like. Okay, so 3 months ago I went wild with fluorescent marking paint, pretty much just in the nick of time. Because if we follow the line of paint markers And we look just a little bit to the east. That's what we find. 7 metres from the boundary, and as you can see, everything in here is rotten, not good for anything. That's probably 40 years growth, that's probably 80 years growth, 120 years to create a 6 metre long round log and make a marvellous mess on the floor of the forest. There's a mark on that tree, there's a mark on that tree. I have to be really careful to line them up with a line on that stump there. So the boundary goes along there, and that's where the stump is. 3 metres off my boundary. There's a bearded heath plant that grows edible berries right on the border. And just carnage and eucalyptus destruction on Charlie's side. To cut that down, the root ball's been busted out there, and this has just been knocked to the ground and wasted. Dear oh dear oh dear. What a shame. I'm so glad I put the can of paint across the boundary. It might be faint, but it sure has done the job. He has gone close though. That paint mark has got the crown of a cut down tree pushed onto it. Once again, there's the paint mark. And there's a tree that he's pushed across the fence. And this, I'm afraid, is a pole that's been wasted. Pink paint. It's remarkable how good it is at stopping bulldozers. Nature is messy. But I think it's fair to say that loggers are messier. There's the mark on this tree. There's the boundary peg. There's a mark on that tree there as well. Trachymean incisor. Wild native parsnip. See, I'm growing food over here. Just barely on my side of the border. As you can see, spray painted tree. Good boy. Stayed on his side of the boundary. Which runs along there. And stuff on my side is safe. But you can certainly see why the wildlife prefers my company to that of my neighbours. I am so glad I spray painted this boundary. There's my mark. And I'm assuming the reason that he didn't cut this one down is because it's got a dead, hollow core, as indicated by that branch dry sticking out of it. And there's the burned, dead skeleton inside of it, which was probably burned in 1958. And apparently, this country here is too thick, too steep, too rocky and too hard even for modern machinery. Therefore, the carved currajong trees that I am custodian of are safe. Isn't that good? Because they are not particularly far on my side of the boundary. But like I said, this ground is hard enough to protect the trees all by itself. And this side of the creek, it's even tougher. So although he could come up this slope, he's not going to. If you look right out there, there's a tree stump. That's as close as he's come here. Trachymean incisor. Flowering. I really have a hard time getting my head around the hubris of killing a 120 or 150 year old tree just to get a hold of a 20-foot long billet of stringy bark with a hollow dead core so that you can prove to yourself that you can't sawmill it and get much timber out of it. When you purchase the land, pay the rates, buy the machinery, pay the workers, buy the fuel, pay the insurance, makes me wonder if he's going to break even, let alone make a profit. Personally, I just pay the rates and let the forest regenerate itself, and ideally it may come back to being a food forest. Heath plant, mukran, wattle seeds for flower and damper and wattle chino, flax lily, xantheria, mat rush, spike rush, and of course Trachymean incisor, the wild native parsnip. So that's my side. There's the boundary blaze, and run straight down there. And all this mess out here this is what a sawmiller does to a patch of regrowth country when he buys it for the logging. In the middle of a forest of longleaf spike rush, which is a food plant. There used to be a really nice tree there. Here I am standing on the stump. That's a piece they cut out of it. And that's the crown. I really think it looks better on my side of the boundary. And like I said, I'm not entirely certain that old mate is going to break even on this when it's all added up and divided by the first number he thought of when he had the brainstorm in the first place. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. What do you think about that? My boundary's about 4 metres the other side of that tree stump. When I first heard chainsaws going up here, they were 350 metres from my boundary in that direction. So whereas my boundary actually runs straight through that tree, due magnetic north, the boundary was not known to old mate on his chainsaw, and he was going to keep going all the way out to there, which is where the power lines are, and all of this country across here, 50 acres of it, is going to be logged. You might even like to frame it in terms that I paid for the land and I've been paying rates for 25 years purely so that I could be in position to be on the spot on the day to be able to stop that logging crew and save 50 acres of my own place. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.